You've got this idea that a Bitcoin is like internet money, right? But the real answer, the deeper answer is way cooler than that.
A digital currency in which transactions can be performed without the need for a central bank.
What is a Bitcoin? Yes.
You've probably heard of Bitcoin, but you may not be entirely sure what it is or what it takes to make it.
What does a digital asset mining operation look like? I mean, are there shovels digging in the ground? What does it look like?
It depends where the location. They're essentially semi-trailers that have methane gas powered generators that are plugged into the well and big shipping containers full of racks of Bitcoin miners.
Okay, and a Bitcoin miner is actually a computer.
Yeah, it's about the size of a toaster and it uses 3 times the energy of a house.
A recent New York Times investigation found that just 34 Bitcoin mines in the U.S. are using as much electricity as 3 million households.
Bitcoin's wasteful use of energy rivals most mid-sized nations.
Bitcoin on track to consume like all of the world's energy by 2020.
Cryptocurrency mining facility in the village and several that were illegally connected to the power.
The days of making money from a small mining operation are dead.
Globally, about 755 million people do not have access to electricity, and a large chunk of those people live in Africa.
We started generating electricity here way back in 2013. That's when we started distributing power to the rural communities. At the moment, so many people are benefiting from the electricity. I may tell you that we are connecting up to close to about 1,700 households. And then we have got also connected about 12 primary schools and 3 secondary schools using the electricity that we generate here. We are not yet connected to the national grid. It's an off-grid system. So all the electricity that we generate and distribute here goes to the people of Bondo.
Because of the different challenges in Africa, either whether it's infrastructure, transmission and distribution, you find that these mini-grids are really filling in the gap where the mini-grid is not able to support those communities.
Our microgrid uses water or hydro. So we took advantage of Richenya River to start generating electricity. At the moment, we have got 3 power plants, which are cascading in nature. You can see that we do have, excess energy. Now, the question is, what do we do with this electricity?
We do Bitcoin mining in different parts of rural Africa, Kenya and Malawi right now. Our primary purpose is to mine Bitcoin. However, it's in the service of pushing electrification to the edges in Africa where it hasn't reached yet. At Gridless, we find stranded energy and make sure that it doesn't go to waste anymore. We partner with energy developers who have built out some type of renewable energy. We take that excess energy that's going to waste currently, and we use it for Bitcoin mining.
Bitcoin is a process whereby, heavy-duty computers use a lot of electricity to generate what we call coins. We've just partnered with gridways who are doing, Bitcoin mining.
We partner with them because they usually have to overbuild because the community will get to a certain usage in 5, 7, or 10 years, but they're not there yet.
If, for example, they're generating 300 kilowatts and they only have 10 kilowatts that's in use, that means they have 290 that's generated, but it's wasted.
Bitcoin mining strengthens mini-grids. It allows them to be sustainable so that they make money off of the wasted energy that they were creating before.
How would you get energy into that city? You would have to create debt to finance that industry. A lot of those regions can't support that type of debt. Somebody in that village can Bitcoin mine today. They don't need financing to do it. It provides the financing. And then the byproduct of that is clean, green energy. So you have an entirely decentralized energy system being built out that enhances life all over the world.
It's really important to continue to develop the electricity in Africa, and the Bitcoin mining gives money to the new plants. We must work on all possibilities to give new electricity to people. To have an economical development, you absolutely need electricity. If you don't have electricity, you can't have a development. It's very simple.
When the people of Bondo village received electricity, the lives of people changed.
There were a lot of darkness around here, even at night. So we saw light when the electricity came here. Previously, we were using candles, and they could be blown off during the night when you were having some operations and the like, so it wasn't okay. Also, we use electricity for our refrigeration. Our refrigerators are running right now. It's a very expensive to run such a project, particularly in the rural areas like this one. Yeah, and you can see even the topography of the land is very hilly, and access to it, it's a hard to reach area. So for the electricity to continue, even with all the cyclones that has been there, you have seen that we are still having power. So I think some of the initiative that these other companies are bringing in, I think also helping us to still have power. So I'm always happy to have power here.
The goal is the success of these countries in terms of development. And I think mining can really help many of these countries.
Akuti akamapanga zinthu zawozo, akamapanga kuphiri zinthu zimagwira ntchito kunja.
Ineo sina mvepo za Bitcoin.
Ineo sina mvepo za Bitcoin.
On October 31st, 2008, an email is sent to the cypherpunks mailing list from an anonymous figure, Satoshi Nakamoto. The email contains a white paper laying out a peer-to-peer electronic cash system called Bitcoin. Bitcoin represents a novel and crucially decentralized solution to the problem of money. Since inception, the founder remained anonymous and they disappeared in 2011.
Bitcoin is a way to exchange value online. Modern money, money for the internet.
When I first learned about Bitcoin, the most exciting part for me was no intermediaries. I want to send money to my brother. It's just me sending money to my brother. He receives it within 10 minutes and it's done. No one else is involved. No fees that are extensive. That's really the most exciting part for me.
The internet did a pretty good job by giving people informational freedom. Anyone can now be part of the media. Anyone can consume non-state provided media. Bitcoin is going to do the same thing, but for money. The government has been in control of the money.
Bitcoin essentially divorced money from the state. It allowed trust. Essentially, you could have trust without an institution because you had decentralization and security together.
Bitcoin is a token in a system that's rewarded for solving complex problems, right? But you have to run a computer to solve those problems.
Bitcoin mining is math. It's just solving a hash function over and over. And a hash function you could solve with pencil and paper. You don't really need computers. The only reason we use computers is because they're faster than me sitting there with a pen and paper.
The Bitcoin you're rewarded is directly proportional to the energy you spend to solve the problems to earn Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is energy money.
The opportunities to electrify and monetize not just wasted hydro, but like literally waste, right? So the world's trash.
I started mining Bitcoin in 2013, so I've been around almost a decade now. Mining Bitcoin is very energy intensive. It's your biggest cost. I'm a co-founder of Nodal Power. We saw the wasted energy opportunity at landfills. So that's what we do now is we develop power plants at landfills and mine Bitcoin at landfills where appropriate. The average American produces about 5 pounds of trash a day, so there's trash being collected everywhere. It goes to the landfill, gets dumped off. All that trash decomposes over time. That decomposition process creates methane gas. That methane gas is the stinky stuff that you're kind of smelling at the landfill that everyone's afraid of. And that landfill gas can actually combust.
When you dispose of your garbage, put it in a can, garbage truck takes it to a landfill. Once that garbage gets to the landfill, it's typically put into a large hole or pit. That garbage is covered with kind of a membrane system to trap a lot of the gases. At the beginning of that garbage being received at the landfill, there's a lot of nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen in that garbage or in that cell. There's roughly 4 phases to the decomposition process. Phase 1, like I said, you've got hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. Phase 2, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen start to decline. Carbon dioxide starts to be created and ramp up. Phase 3, the carbon dioxide starts to peak and methane production gradually starts to pick up. And then once you get into phase 4 of that decomposition process, you get to a pretty good balance of roughly 50% methane and 45 to 50% carbon dioxide. And then what happens is that methane and carbon dioxide needs to be trapped and controlled and then eventually combusted. They collect the gas with a vacuum. The vacuum kind of pulls on the landfill, bringing that gas to a central location. And then from that central location is combusted through a flare, kind of a candlestick type exhaust. From that flare, we take the gas, we run it through a compression system, which is a simple knockout for liquids, moisture, dirt. We also need to get the gas dry as possible to run it through our engine, and then we combust it on site, and then from that generate electricity straight to our data center.
So this is what happens on a landfill. Bitcoin miner comes in, captures the gas, burns it into CO2, runs a generator, mines the Bitcoin with that. The resulting gas that they put out, small amount of CO2, is warming gas, but it is 1/84th as warming as the methane that it's eliminating. And that's a huge gain for the environment. But also that electricity that they produce and the electrical infrastructure they put in to capture that means that if that area is no longer stranded, for instance, if they get grid connectivity and the ability to transmit that electricity elsewhere, then the grid could buy the electricity instead of the miners. So it just completely flips the situation of how much are we going to pay to mitigate this thing to how much money can we make from mitigating it.
Some of the worst landfills that some people have to live in because of the horrible situation in some of these neighborhoods, and just not just environmental but health hazard that these landfills cause, and literally clean up those landfills and get the methane that's emitted from them and turn that into energy, because there is now a market that is strong enough and a off-taker of that potential energy that's going to drive that revolution.
The origin of the Bitcoin mining boom started with a particular Bitcoin data center that was on Seneca Lake in central New York. This particular plant had been a coal plant, but was retrofitted to then be a natural gas power plant. But the company also mined Bitcoin, again, to become more profitable. This particular power plant on Seneca Lake had been fought no matter what it was doing. It was fought way before it was even being used as a Bitcoin data center.
Somebody needs to generate power for all of us. We understand that. However, we do not need to pollute this lake for Bitcoins.
Residents here warned the power plant worsens climate change while threatening Seneca Lake, the region's economic driver.
Burn more fossil fuels in the middle of climate change to make fake money? It's ludicrous.
And so what was originally a very localized, hyper-localized issue was then exploited by a politician named Anakelis, who used this in order to blow this whole thing up into a statewide moratorium.
All of these wineries, obviously, the vineyards depend on the climate that's here. Very, very sensitive.
Now, where did they get their data from that they used to make the claims that Bitcoin data centers on the lake, which was just one, was boiling the lake, was killing all the fish, all things that were disproved by any analysis of the lake. But where did they get this data? Well, they got it from where everybody gets their data on Bitcoin, which is from an erroneous debunked source from Digiconomist, also named Alex de Vries.
For more on this, let's turn now to Alex de Vries. He is a financial economist.
Alex de Vries, welcome to Decrypt.
The Bitcoin network having a massive carbon footprint as well. I originally started working on this subject back in 2016 when I myself read an article by a journalist produced for Motherboard that said Bitcoin is unsustainable, and the article also said that a single Bitcoin transaction on average was consuming about as much power as the average US household for a period of 1.5 days at the time. There had been some research on this topic before that, but when I read into this topic in 2016, I quickly realized that there was nothing. I had no live information, and the most recent information you could find was from 2014. That was it. So I was thinking when I first read it that was something worth discussing, and that was something the average Bitcoin user should be aware about, especially because it's taking quite a lot of energy, and I just wanted to make that more transparent for the user that, hey, be aware that this is happening in the background, and that's when I launched my Bitcoin Energy Consumption Index. And that was the first live source of information where you could get this type of data for the Bitcoin network.
Here's how it started. Digiconomist, Alex de Vries, central banker, his amateur, non-peer-reviewed website became cited by various media outlets and raised alarm bells about Bitcoin's potential environmental impact, which were then read by researchers at the University of Hawaii. Undergraduates wrote a paper analyzing Bitcoin's environmental impact. They published it in Nature Climate Change. The conclusion of the article and the title of the article is that Bitcoin mining alone, apart from all other human activities, could raise global temperatures by more than 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial times. It was refuted 3 times in the same journal in the same year. And if you go look up the article, Those three refutations are linked as matters arising right at the top of the article. It's very easy. If anybody looks at the article, can see it. But that article led to a letter signed by 70 environmental organizations to Congress calling for an investigation of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency's environmental impact. And it was the only source cited in that letter to support the claim that Bitcoin would impact the climate. Nobody cited, of course, the matters arising or checked into the source at all. That letter led to congressional hearings, which in turn led to an executive order by the Biden administration, which in turn led the Office of Science and Technology Policy to write a report on Bitcoin's environmental impact, which is what we have just dealt with today. That's the whole kind of sequence of events.
And this is where they get these sort of outrageous claims that ignore all the data and facts and science of what Bitcoin mining is.
You know, they stopped repeating some of the worst mistakes, so it helped. But that means they never apologize. That means the truth doesn't matter. That means they don't care about the reality of it. They just kind of know they're headed in the right direction and they're just going to support it in whatever way they can.
I think we should scrutinize everything that is using a lot of power for the simple reason that we're amid a climate emergency and we have to be very mindful about which ways we are using our power to avoid that we are using unnecessary fossil fuels.
This is the face of radical climate protest. Two young activists throwing soup onto one of the world's most famous paintings, Van Gogh's Sunflowers.
Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people?
Everything in the world has a trade-off. So everything has a pro and a con. Everything has a cost and a benefit. And I think it's important to understand that because in today's day and age, whether we want to look at, you know, in the United States or in the West wanting to crack down on cryptocurrencies because they're bad, well, what's bad? What's bad? Bad for you might be good for me. Bitcoin would be bad for the ECB and the IMF because that breaks their grip on the financial system, but that's good for the majority of the people.
And CEO Jamie Dimon lashing out at cryptocurrencies yesterday during a hearing on Capitol Hill, suggesting they be banned.
I've always been deeply opposed to crypto, Bitcoin, etc. You pointed out the only true use case for it is criminals, drug traffickers, anti-money laundering, tax avoidance. If I was the government, I'd close it down.
Watch what they do and not what they say, is always what I say.
Carl, JP Morgan says it has reached an agreement in principle to settle the Jeffrey Epstein sex predator litigation with the U.S. Virgin Islands with a payout of $75 million and led to a series of embarrassing disclosures of relationships that high-ranking bank officials at the time, including one former executive who frequented Epstein's private island.
The topic of what makes a power source clean or dirty is actually about as useful as the topic of good and evil.
When an oil and gas well is drilled, some of the excess gas is flared before a gathering line can be buried and hooked up to the well to take the oil away or the gas away.
What oftentimes happens is that oil companies just light that gas on fire on location in what's called a flare.
I think CH4, it's just an amazing molecule. It sort of vibrates at a certain frequency, and that's why it captures the radiation, the heat radiation from the Earth. Right? That's why it keeps us warm. That's why it acts as a blanket. But Bitcoiners look at the very same molecule that the EPA looks at as a pollutant and worth paying to mitigate. We look at that same molecule and it's actually like gas from a gas station, right? For us, it's fuel.
One of the most beautiful energy-dense molecules that God has graced us with is clean burning, and we have it in abundance. And we're over here lighting it on fire. And we're gonna have to tell our grandkids, you know, one day, when who knows how much gas is worth then, that, you know, it's just kind of in the way of our oil wells, and we just lit it on fire.
The natural gas that, you know, you use to light your stove, that's methane. Natural gas is also used in ways to power natural gas power plants that provide electricity to our grids, but it's also a very, very potent greenhouse gas if it emits to the atmosphere uncombusted. This one problem of flaring accounts for about 2% of global human greenhouse gas emissions.
So they're taking what is an unused product, an asset, and they're pulling up mining equipment right next to the oil and gas wells, plugging them into that source of energy and mining for Bitcoin on site next to these wells. So it is an environmental benefit to have those kinds of opportunities brought to an oil and gas well that has not yet been connected to a pipeline.
Crusoe mitigates about 20 million cubic feet of gas from being flared every day. It's the equivalent of about 170,000 cars that are being removed from the road just from Crusoe's footprint, if you kind of compare it on a emissions standpoint.
The next wave of Bitcoin miners and really the next wave of Bitcoin adoption comes from the energy companies.
What Bitcoin mining does in some instances and can do much more of is support the build out of renewable energy in sort of multiple ways. One way it can do this almost immediately is through supporting renewable projects while they wait to connect to the grid.
A lot of power development takes place in a very systematic way. And you typically have very familiar, very large-scale purchasers of that power. Often those are just utilities. And so you need to have the existing transmission lines to have a new power source make sense. Or you need to have a buyer that's willing to be present for that brand new solar development.
You have a significant amount of issues with transmission lines being delayed for renewable energy projects. So you can go out and spend hundreds of millions of dollars in building a wind project or a solar project, and it is stranded, essentially. You can have it come online in 2025, transmission lines don't come in until 2028. You've got 3 years that you're not making any money.
And so Bitcoin miners can come in and they can set up shop for that 2 to 3 to 4 years, depending on how long interconnect takes, and they can monetize what's happening right there at that solar field or that wind farm or whatever it looks like. So the ROI is just much faster in that case.
So what we try to do is say, listen, if we know that we want to have new solar in a specific neighborhood, but we also know that our company would like to have solar for our own purposes, can we marry those two needs and say, if the community wants 50 megawatts and we want 50 megawatts, can we work together and help stand up 100 megawatts? And so by knowing exactly who is going to be purchasing that power from the first day that the pencils come out, we're actually able to really help the economics of the solar project because they have more certainty on what the person buying that power is going to look like. We are providing certainty from day one.
We are investing in Bitcoin mining, but we think that in order to make it really sustainable, it's important to invest also in energy production. We are entering deals with governments where we, of course, provide part of the energy to the country, and we use part for Bitcoin mining. So this is the first Tether mining site. It is in South America. You can see here in green, in blue, these are the containers for the miners. In Uruguay, we are starting the project of a 300 megawatt energy production facility that is all renewable energy. And in El Salvador, it's famous for its volcanoes. We are working to set up the production there as well. And in that case, will be geothermal. The goal is to reach $1 billion in investment just in El Salvador. Everything has to be sustainable and well thought from the beginning in order to actually achieve our philosophy of being considered a good partner of the territory.
When I went to Paraguay and saw how much energy is produced by Itaipu, the dam, the water dam, and what can be done With that energy, it was so special to me, and it was very clear that this was the location for us to mine Bitcoin at that moment, because we can see directly where it comes from.
And that's why I think it's important to choose the right sources of energy to empower this energy-intensive industry, which we call today Bitcoin mining.
We can see the transformational change for the country because there's not enough industry at the moment for the country, for everyone to use that energy for themselves.
It's a multi-dimensional problem. If you think about Latin and South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, these are the locations where you have the most sun, the most wind, that they're incredibly wet, and you also have the highest rates of energy poverty, digital exclusion, financial exclusion. It's not hyperbolic to say that Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining can solve these problems for billions of people. It could bring 1 billion people out of energy poverty.
The FBI calls it the most sophisticated criminal marketplace on the internet. Thousands of drug dealers used it to sell drugs and completely hide their identities.
The site operated much like eBay. It allowed users to buy and sell illegal drugs, guns, and even hire hitmen.
Anchor, and I am just amazed that a website like this can stay up for so long.
Yeah, it's accessed through a special network on the internet, which called Tor. So you can't identify what their IP address is. Also, the payment system is all through Bitcoins, which is basically digital currency, not backed up by any international banks, not backed up by any US banks, but simply based on the confidence of the users who exchange these Bitcoins computer to computer.
The first time I heard about Bitcoin was in relation to like the Mt. Gox situation, and then the second time I heard about Bitcoin was about Silk Road. And both of those, you know, were very negative.
And I think for a lot of people, as soon as they hear the B word, as soon as they hear Bitcoin, they're like, I don't know, that's that, you know, that cypherpunk, you know, criminal terrorist financing money.
Bitcoin is a young technology. It's not well understood, but it has a lot of potential to do good. It has potential to do bad. And it really depends on who's involved, who's participating in the network. So it's anarchism in the political philosophy sense of it's rules without rulers. It's built on consensus. There's no gatekeeper. It changes the way you think about the world once you start to understand it and use it.
Proposing the idea that people should be able to freely transact without surveillance or censorship of how they choose to cast their economic vote or what they desire in life. This was, despite the murky reputation of the website, fundamentally Ross's perspective on what he was doing and what Bitcoin could do. And for that, he was convicted to several consecutive life sentences and is committed to die in jail.
We're driving to one of our first mining sites. It used to be an old paper mill, and it's now repurposed for lighter industries and even just office space. When the manufacturing left, the process lacked heat production. Now we are bringing the heat back. In Finland, the heat is vital. What you see here is building that used to be purposed for the paper industry, and now it's pretty much sitting idle. Need heat now when the paper industry has left. There's no process that creates heat in itself, so the heat needs to be bought or brought somehow to the location.
When you mine Bitcoin, it generates a lot of heat, and that is a problem in many parts of the world. But in Finland, in the cold climates, it's an asset. So why wouldn't I put the electricity into the Bitcoin miner generate heat and also generate Bitcoin with it. So we can provide the end user a cheaper alternative of heat.
Finland uses a lot of heat, and especially in the winter time when it gets very cold. And currently, the main sources are burning of wood or wood-related products. And there is a collective plan to reduce burning or even completely eliminate burning of these materials to create heat.
Companies like Nordblock, they are paying for using that electricity. They produce hot air as a result of using many computers. So we are keen on to use that heat as a heating plant in our purposes.
When you look at the amount of heat that can be generated by an immersion mining site, you could heat acres and acres of greenhouses. You could heat homes. You could do lots of things with the heat.
With mining, we could distribute our heat units in smaller parts to difficult areas within the district heating network that currently doesn't have heat production. But also we can put tens of megawatts in one place and connect it to one key central point where all of the heat is distributed to multiple of homes and buildings and apartments and basically even the whole city.
In Holland, for example, there's a mining site where they take the liquid from the immersion system and they use that to generate heat for greenhouses, to grow fruit and to grow vegetables.
A greenhouse, or a house in the Netherlands in general, is heated by natural gas. So what you see in the greenhouse also is these pipes. They normally heat the greenhouse. And that's done by burning natural gas. And what we do now with the miners is that we reduce the amount of natural gas by heating it with renewable electricity. So we get such a high renewable generation in the Netherlands. All this renewable energy that is in excess, we can use with mining. 1 watt in of energy is basically 1 watt of heat coming out. All this mining should also heat businesses or greenhouses or houses, because otherwise there's a part of it which is waste.
I think we're entering an era of high-performance computing that we're going to see impacting our lives in many ways. Bitcoin mining just is one form of high-density computation. It applies to money and a system of value articulation. But when we look at the state of technology and the way we're interacting, we're only just really beginning down the path of digitally rendered environments as the basis for human interactions. So data centers, whether they're mining Bitcoin or providing video rendering services, are going to be increasingly important in the way we provision society and economies globally.
Let's go!
Istanbul, here we come!
Do you accept Bitcoin? Can I pay with Bitcoin? No? Thank you. At the end, a third of the people we asked were accepting Bitcoin.
They used to throw this all in the garbage on the rivers or to the lake, killing slowly our lake. So now doing this, mining Bitcoin, we can, save our lake and get some Bitcoin basically from garbage. And the really cool thing about this is that anybody can do this. Anybody in any country, anywhere, and just wow.
At
88 terahash of output, the Lago Bitcoin mine makes about $230 worth of Bitcoin per month, or about half of an average monthly salary in Guatemala.
Where I was going to have all my electrical outlets, where I was going to have my fan outlets, where I was going to have my 240.
And now my 2 machines have been running for 308 days exactly.
We can drain it, we filter it, we push it with a pump past some safety sensors into this shell into.
Mining Disrupt is a yearly conference that we do in Miami, and it's focused on the Bitcoin mining industry. The Bitcoin mining industry has grown tremendously over the years. We're still a new and upcoming industry, but every year it gets better, it gets larger. You have new players coming in from all around the world. You really find people literally from every continent and every country. We get a lot of people from Asia, a lot of people from Europe. We get people from South America. Also a big community for mining over there, Argentina, Paraguay, Venezuela. Just very, very diverse crowd. Revolution.
I think that over the last 6 years or so of the industrialization of Bitcoin mining, we've already seen a lot of starts and fits. This is a new industry, and we're going to make mistakes. Not everyone is just going to come out of the gate with a winning idea. At the same time, I think what's obvious is that this is here to stay, that we will play a significant role in the future of data, the future of money, and I think most importantly in the future of energy.
Bitcoin is tied to the laws of physics, which as far as we know are the only laws that humanity has yet to break. So by tying into the laws of physics, we are tying Bitcoin into a reality that humanity cannot manipulate and control. And it infers a real cost. You have to do real things in the real physical world. You have to move actual electrons around before you can submit any kind of information to the system or make any action. Thus, cheating comes with a cost, lying comes with a cost, dishonesty comes with a cost, and most importantly, the profit and benefit becomes almost minimal and non-existent. So having energy-backed money, having money that is tied into the reality of physics means that everyone around the world will get a global, open, and neutral system where you can trust that there are no corners being cut.
In a few years, Texas is going to be the Bitcoin capital of the world.
Our goal is to mine Bitcoin at a cost less than what it's traded for. So the delta between the market price of Bitcoin and our cost to mine is the profit that we generally make.
Today we have over 2,000 megawatts of Bitcoin mining in Texas, which depending on the day and how much power is being consumed in the Texas grid can be up to 3% of all power consumed in the ERCOT grid.
Texas has a lot of really great resource things going for it. You know, we have abundant oil, abundant natural gas, and we have the intersection of the wind and solar belt. You know, Texas is an energy powerhouse across the board, but at the same time, we have a culture here that really empowers bottom-up solutions. So in really taking principles from the oil and gas industry. So if you're an energy entrepreneur, you can innovate here with a higher degree of confidence. And so this is a culture that is ingrained into, you know, across our state and especially out into West Texas.
This could be the next oil and gas for Texas, which has fueled our growth for 100 years. So the next 100 years could be fueled by Bitcoin mining. A couple weeks ago, we had a storm blow through the entire United States, called it an Arctic blast. And in Texas, we needed power in homes because everybody was cranking up their heat.
Breaking historic temperature records that have been in place now for decades. As you mentioned, the entire state, for the first time in weather history, under that winter storm warning. We also had portions in West Texas that were under a blizzard warning.
Texas Bitcoin miners had a 96% curtailment during that time. It was over Christmas of 2022. So 96% of all Bitcoin mining load turned off in order to push their power back into the grid.
Peak hours are basically, you could think of it as like the worst type of rush hour. And it's where everybody is using a lot of electricity at the same time. And it may only happen a handful of hours a year, but the system has to be designed and ready for those hours.
When you learn how you can start integrating a power source with a load, with something that consumes power, that is forgiving, that is willing to be turned on and off, that is willing to be turned off and then used for something else. That's the beauty of it. We start learning the basics of flexible load.
And so really, this is the first time in recorded history where you have this flexible load that can be a partner to the grid.
You know, if you look at the news, you see warnings for rolling blackouts in California this summer, rolling blackouts maybe even in Texas, which is the largest, state grid in the whole United States and one of the most energy independent places on earth.
Power goes into everything we do. Power saves lives, it helps treat people, it helps produce food, it helps produce all the critical services that we all need. So communities and grids that have higher generating capacities have greater assurance that they are going to have supply of power available 24/7, 365 throughout the year.
Very large majority of the power created throughout the world actually doesn't go anywhere. And it's because we take it for granted that when you walk over to a light switch and you flip the switch, that there's extra power that was on the grid to turn that light on, because that light wasn't on earlier. So that immediate access to power actually creates a huge amount of wasted energy across the grid.
In order for us to keep the grid stable, we have to overproduce energy by a significant amount, or have the capacity to overproduce energy by a significant amount to make sure that if there is any sort of fluctuation in demand or supply, that we can compensate for it in order to keep the grid stable.
By definition, an overbuild means you are planning on a tremendous amount of wasted energy.
We are seeing tremendous increases in the demand for electricity, and there's only going to go up as we have more electric vehicles, as gas-run appliances of all kinds in houses are going to be pushed onto electricity.
Electric vehicles are going to cause the single largest jump in the consumption of energy. If we can't build enough renewable energy, guess what? Electric vehicles are going to cause even more carbon dioxide because of all the natural gas plants that are going to have to be built. To provide the charging for all those Tesla, you're going to have to build 30 megawatt charging stations all across the country.
So how are we going to pay for all that additional power generation that's going to be needed and all the equipment that's going to need to transport and so we can ultimately consume that power? Bitcoin mining can fill the gap by, again, paying utilities for power that would otherwise go unused, to give them dollars to put back into their systems to grow it. And that doesn't require the government to step in. It doesn't require the government to raise taxes. It's cash flow to a utility from a willing buyer.
We all plug our appliances and we plug our air conditioners and we plug our computers and our lights and our hospitals into an electricity grid. And that's the way it's worked for about 100 years, ever since Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla and Sam Insull kind of created the industry 100 odd years ago in the United States. And it was a good invention. It's widely heralded as being one of the most important inventions of the last 500 years. But we've outgrown it. Our collective demand for electricity has grown by orders of magnitude on a per capita basis since those early days, where People just sort of wanted a light next to their, their reading spot after the sun went down at night. But now our whole civilization runs on electricity.
And I think when you look at the history of the world, countries and communities that had affordable and reliable power have clearly a better standard of living, have more individual liberty, more prosperity, more opportunities. And so I think there's a lot of ideas that are being discussed that energy use is a bad thing. So we need to separate energy use from emissions. And really, more power is a great thing. And it comes from a place of privilege, from people saying, we should use less power. We should first conserve energy. There's a whole host of stuff, heat pumps, other ways, being more efficient with our energy use. But just straight up consuming less power is just not grounded in reality.
Energy waste is bad. Energy consumption is a very good thing.
So we don't want less energy. We want more and cleaner energy, and we want it in a system that provides abundance.
As we advance from these agrarian societies we started using coal to where we are now, like if we want to be a tech, an innovation-based economy, if we want to be, if we want high GDP, if we want to succeed as a society, we need to be using sources of power. And it's like even at the most fundamental basic needs, like our healthcare, like all the machines that are in a hospital, they take up a lot of power. So you're going from maybe a small clinic to a hospital, there's a greater energy use. If you look at the charts of all the developed versus developing countries, they're better off economically, and it's only fair that we, bring the rest of the world up to a certain standard of living. So I don't think that's a waste. Someone in Africa having no lighting, it's not a waste to create power for them so that they can turn on the lights and not have to go to sleep when it gets dark.
The logic is that climate change is ruining the planet, and therefore we need to cut down on energy and emissions in order to address climate change. Anything that is using energy and generating emissions then is therefore a target, a potential avenue for reducing emissions to address climate change. The problem here is that, as I said earlier, Bitcoin mining is the only natural incentive that exists on the planet to reduce energy waste and energy emissions.
We're not really looking at the problem in totality in terms of whether or not we're good stewards of pretty much the environment and the ecological ramifications of what we've already brought onto ourselves. We want to make sure that we are effectively using what we have available, and if Bitcoin can do that by drawing down from surpluses or by offering us a very effective and a very useful new technology, even if it does provide an additional demand on our energy infrastructure, it might be worthwhile. It offers us some great benefit that we can't necessarily just throw out by saying it's an add-on to a problem of energy demand.
When you think about the possibilities for Bitcoin on the energy side, really being able to reduce global carbon emissions by using creative ways to capture and monetize energy at source in a way that's never been imagined before.
People that don't understand something, they're scared of it, and so they create a narrative that in one way or another tries to discredit the thing that they're scared of.
A famous headline, I think a Newsweek headline from like 2017, and it said, Bitcoin on track to consume like all of world's energy by 2020.
A lot of things that we hear in the media are Bitcoin mining uses as much energy as Norway, or pick country X. It changes. This is true. Do you know what other industry uses as much energy as Norway? Every single major industry uses as much energy as Norway. This is because we're comparing apples and oranges. We're comparing a major industry to a small country. We need to apply context to how much energy Bitcoin mining is using. And so let's compare to other industries as opposed to countries, which is a very misleading and manipulative way that the media gets clicks. And so when we want to talk about how much electricity Bitcoin is using, well, it's using somewhere between video games and Christmas lights. It uses less than extractive mining that actually physically mines in the earth. It uses less than transportation for restaurants. It uses less than airline industry. However, those industries are cemented into our daily lives for the majority of people.
And so I think these are very nuanced conversations that we need the data. We need to have these open discussions, and we need to have the civility to respectfully disagree.
No, if you have low carbon, you're good. If you're high carbon, you're bad. If you're coal, you're bad. If you're solar, you're good. And the truth is, there's a lot more to the conversation than just this simplistic, they're normalizing everything to this one standard of carbon emissions.
We have to be able to sort of consider the full scope of the environmental impact. And if we're only trying to solve for carbon, that's going to point you in one direction. If you're trying to solve for carbon and local water quality, that may point you in a different direction. So I think we have to think about the full scope of the environmental impact in how we assess energy sources.
We need to work together on these issues instead of pointing the finger at the other one, saying they're bad, calling one, oil and gas is dirty and bad, the other one's clean, renewable. We need to talk about how you make those products. The oil and gas that goes into making those, the cobalt mining, the lithium mining. Let's be honest about that.
What were the raw inputs? What were the people inputs? All of that stuff, it's going to matter whether it's a mine that's a very dirty cobalt mine in an emerging country versus drilling a natural gas well in Western Pennsylvania. We have to be able to sort of consider the full scope of the environmental impact.
Let's discuss these things collectively and together, and let's try to work hand in hand in promoting more energy. That's all we want. I'm an energy maximalist.
Arguing against Bitcoin, based on research and publications from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and all the BP and all these organizations that they've spent decades campaigning against, suddenly the enemy that has wrecked their planet, that they have always been pointing to as being our financial overlords that have been over-consuming our resources, now they are suddenly their best friends and the people that are their intellectual bedrocks.
And so when you have control, then your goal is to maintain control. Christine Lagarde, formerly with the IMF, now she's with the ECB, she said that innovation is a threat to our financial stability. So they want to stop all innovation. In the United States, Elizabeth Warren is running on a campaign, an anti-crypto campaign. It's an anti-technology campaign because technology, as Lagarde said, innovation is a threat to our financial stability, which she's right. It's a threat to the status quo. It changes things. It's called creative destruction. When a new technology is created, it kills the old way. Not out of spite or out of hate, because it's 1,000 times better.
And so all of this is just a peaceful protest. I like to think of it, it's just we as people, we have tools, we can use code, we can use the internet to organize and to express ourselves and to show dissent. And it just seems to me that Bitcoin is just trying to continue that struggle from Occupy, but in a way that directly targets the financial system because it's money. And it's basically saying, I can use it, I can do what I want with it. Try to stop me, it's decentralized. Good luck.
The reason why this is so critical to start here is because it helps us avoid these, boogeyman perceptions of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, right? All it is, it's a computer that secures this network and does so in a way that it is monetizing electricity in all the ways that we just described.
There's not been an industry to come along in the history of industries that's just gotten everything perfect, every time. So I think Bitcoin mining in many ways will be similar to any maturing industry we've seen from the past.
Most things that we're used to in the digital space, JPEGs, movies, can be copied by decree, by someone's decision, someone pushing a button. Bitcoin is not like that. The reason that Bitcoin cannot be copied or counterfeited is because it's based on math that cannot be reversed.
It's very much like the beginning of the internet era, right? Like, people didn't know what the internet was. People would laugh like, what is that @ symbol? What is that for? I found for myself that it's better to talk a lot less about what Bitcoin is and talk a lot more about what Bitcoin is capable of.
If I hold a Bitcoin in Kenya today and you hold a Bitcoin in the US today, we are on the same page. While if I hold a Kenya shilling today and you hold a dollar today, we're not on the same page. Because if I use the Kenya shilling, for every dollar, that's 130 shillings from a Kenya perspective. So you will not be able to have the same conversation when you're trying to compare the two kind of currencies. But if I hold a Bitcoin, you hold a Bitcoin, we're on the same page. It doesn't matter if I'm black or you're white. It doesn't matter if I'm female, you're male. It doesn't matter if I'm tall, you're short. The Bitcoin levels the playing ground.
Money is a representation of our human energy. I get up, I drink coffee, I might nibble on something, I go to work. Every 2 weeks, I get paid, right? It's an exchange. Money is a way for us to exchange value. I gave my physical labor in order to produce something. And that money is a call option on anything I may want in the future, any good or any service.
With all the bank failures we've seen recently, seemingly to come out of nowhere, certainly outside of the control of individuals, it I think makes a stronger case for having something of value that is separate from the fiat currency system.
It is a way to own your own time. It is a way to store your own energy. And it is a way for you to take that around the world, outside anyone's jurisdictions, outside anyone's purview. Yeah, I think that tool as a way to secure your own freedom and sovereignty, and possibly also just your own well-being in the future, is extremely important.
I don't know when Bitcoin will be the principal currency in the world, but I'm sure it will happen.
Bitcoin has always been dirty coin. This coin started as a way to buy drugs on the Silk Road. That was its origin. That was the first real use case that exploded. Like, I bought alpaca socks. I'm not into drugs, but there's a much bigger market for drugs than alpaca socks. And Bitcoin was serving a need that wasn't being served by other monies. What we've come to see now is that the ability to skirt regulations going across borders and in authoritarian regimes is the superpower of Bitcoin. Its superpower is it's running outside the current system.
So like what Bitcoin truly is like a revolution in energy and a revolution in our relationship to the information world and the information age.
And what's deemed dirty is just whatever is outside the current system. That's what the system is. The system defines clean, right? Now there's a kind of dirty that like characterizes the whole system, right? Like banking is dirty. Like the cantillionaire's game is dirty. The game of self-dealing and rescuing yourself with bailouts. Bitcoin is a reaction to the dirtiness of the whole system. But so in some sense, it's the ultimate clean up coin. It cleans up the dirtiness of the existing financial system. What gives Bitcoin its value is that it's outside the system. It's a way to do things that ordinary money can't do. If you fold it inside the system, not only is it like not really Bitcoin anymore, but maybe it's also not valuable anymore. Because what makes it valuable is its ability to circumvent those controls.
It's the coolest thing since sliced bread.
Ah, that's so cool.
Do you believe that proof of work is really required for this to be successful in the long run?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that economic game theory is counterintuitive, even to people with a background in economics, right? So there are some very interesting effects here. So, I mean, one thing that I think there's, if you scroll through Satoshi's old writings, he had said something like, yes, it uses electricity, but as with gold, it's far more efficient to the world to have a hard money versus the kind of slippage and churn that happens when you have political money. And then another comment I've heard is Paul Stortz made the observation that there is an economic incentive to obtain money. And so people are willing to expend up to the commodity cost to obtain it. And if there is no clean cost, that effort will be expended in other ways, i.e. in political lobbying, favoritism, audits, physical bank security, cross-checks, controls, theft, insider double dealing, inefficient political systems. So we haven't saved a thing. What we've done is we've had a messy, uneven playing field